Growing microgreens rarely comes up when talking about business ideas, but with low startup costs, easy setup, and ever-growing demand, it can be a lucrative business to launch. In today's episode, you'll learn the first steps to get started in your microgreen business, how to grow your microgreens business at a commercial scale, and the exact formula to scale your microgreens business from making not-so-micro profits. This is Ryan Atkinson, and you're listening to the UpFlip podcast, where we uncover the secrets of building and running successful businesses. Today, we have Donnie Greens joining us. Don's focus on high-quality products, paired with clever marketing and sales strategies, has allowed him to build Donnie's Greens into a six-figure business, and his sales keep increasing with an expected 100% growth this year. Super excited to welcome Donnie on the podcast. Donnie, thank you so much for being here.
Hey, what's going on? Thanks for having me.
We have had a wide range of topics on this podcast about getting started with businesses and exactly how you can do it. But I'm super excited to peel it back with microgreens because it's kind of a newer concept. So it wasn't new in 2016 when you got started, though. So can you take us back to that time frame when you were thinking about starting Donnie's Greens and what inspired you to get started?
Oh, yeah, back in 2016. So I kind of was born with that entrepreneurship thing. I always knew I wanted to run my own business, but never really had that opportunity. Then my sophomore year in college, I was introduced to urban agriculture, and the way it just worked was so cool to me. It was all organic and closed systems, and everything worked together in a really smart, intelligent way. And that really piqued my interest. It was like, all right, I think I want to be a farmer. I think I want to grow food, weirdly enough. And then I just needed to figure out, all right, well, if I'm going to be a farmer and I'm going to grow stuff to sell, what am I going to grow? And that's what I spent years searching the internet for. And then finally, those videos came up saying, hey, you could start a business growing microgreens. And I was like, all right, this sounds perfect for me.
I like it. Let's set the baseline first. How would you define microgreens for someone that's listening?
Sure. So a microgreen is essentially just a very young plant. Things like broccoli or sunflowers or radishes, instead of growing them out until they're, full-grown vegetables or the seeds that we know, we're actually growing them for about a week or two and then harvesting them at their very earliest stages of growth when they only have their first two leaves.
Okay, super interesting. I think that sets a really good baseline of what microgreens are. And so you're doing a ton of research, you're in college, you have this entrepreneurial bug and you land on microgreens. What was that first step? Once you start getting the research, okay, I want to start doing this. What were some of those first steps that you took to really get this business off the ground?
The first steps I took, it was really just watching a lot of YouTube videos, obviously, just learning as much as I could. And at that time, there wasn't nearly as much content out as there is now. So I was doing a lot of learning and figuring it out. I had some quick start guide that I had found, traded my email for, and it was really just a matter of buying equipment and learning how to grow. I think a lot of people get hung up when they want to do something and just, it's something new. I've never done it before. So getting over that hump and actually making that initial action that oftentimes I find is the hardest part. So I was like, you know what? This is for me. There was none of that for me. I was ready to go. I just bought equipment. I bought seeds. I bought some soil. I bought some trays, and I just started growing these greens based on what I had learned online and started figuring it out as I go.
Interesting. I talk about a lot on this podcast when the biggest difference between someone that's an entrepreneur and a wannabe-preneur is you just take action and you actually get moving on that idea once it does come to mind.
Yeah, for sure. It's the most important part is that action step.
Yeah. And it's probably the most overlooked step. But I want to talk about that equipment that you bought. If someone is okay, I'm kind of interested in this microgreen stuff and starting my own company, what equipment should they be buying early on? And what equipment did you buy early on?
So the advice that I give people when they're first starting out, I see people making some bad decisions. One, buying bad equipment from the start, stuff that's just really cheap and chintzy and it's not going to work for you long term. Even though it seems like, oh, that makes sense because I'm just starting out. No, it's a bad decision because something like a microgreens tray, if you buy a chintzy one, it might last you 2 or 3 grows and then it'll break. But if you buy a heavy duty tray, they will last you literally years and hundreds of growth cycles. So that's just a little example of some of the things I was doing in the beginning that was maybe not the best equipment to start off with. Those crappy trays that led to a tray graveyard, buying very mediocre soil from Home Depot, stuff like that. So I recommend people start off with the high quality equipment and really just get started small. That's the other big thing I see people doing when they're first starting is they buy 4 full rack setups. And I'm like, you haven't even grown microgreens yet. So I would, I recommend growing microgreens before you start determining that this is going to be a business for you, because you might not even like growing microgreens. If you don't like growing microgreens, you probably shouldn't start selling them.
Yeah. Like a question that comes in mind, because like just as like an entrepreneur, like someone that wants to start a business is like, well, how do I make money doing this? And like, are there some microgreens that you would advise some people to like start out with, like a certain vegetable or just on those very early stages?
Yeah, in the beginning, and that's another one of my tips I give, is not to start off with too many varieties because you'll get overwhelmed. So start off with a few simple varieties that are easy to master and that are popular on the market. So the ones that I typically recommend are things like broccoli, peas, radishes, even things like cabbage and kale are very easy to grow. So sunflowers I used to recommend, but they're a little bit tricky. But yeah, so those are some great starter varieties.
Yeah, I think it's really interesting because like you're taking about a week or two for to actually like grow these then, like for the broccoli, for instance.
Yeah, they're under lights for about a week and they're in germination for about 3 days before that. So it's between a week and 2 weeks for most varieties.
Interesting, because like basically once that week and a half, 2 weeks is done, like you could essentially start selling these. Correct me if I'm wrong on that, but it's like, is that how you approach it? Or like, what's that next step?
Absolutely. And that's one of the beautiful aspects of running a microgreens business and starting up a business like this, especially if it's one of your first businesses you've ever had, it was my first business, is the opportunity to get started in this is quick and easy and simple, and it doesn't take a lot of money. And those were the exact things that I was looking for when I first started. Didn't have a lot of money, not a lot of time, not a lot of space, and this was able to work for that. And the fact that they grow in only 1 week, it's such a quick turnaround, not only just from like a learning perspective, because you have to learn how to grow these crops and get them to be high quality enough to sell, but two, just having a new turnover of crops every week and being able to sell them every week, it's just such a tremendous business model.
Yeah, that's what I think is super interesting is like you could really be like cash flowing this like pretty quickly compared to like an agency or like especially like a SaaS company where the cash flow might not happen for like a year and a half. It sounds like with this, like you could actually be cash flowing in under a month if you do this correctly and market it correctly.
Absolutely, especially if you buy the right amount of equipment, so not too much, and just stay right baseline in the very beginning, buy just what you need, and then sell them basically right when you start growing them. Yeah, you can cash flow and get your return on investment in a month.
That's amazing. Let's start with that baseline of like what you need though, because I definitely want to hit on that point because people might not know like the equipment they need. So what is that first equipment? You definitely want to buy the expensive one. We heard that, but like what's like that baseline equipment that you need to get started?
The most basic stuff to get started is trays or something to grow in. So like a vessel or a container. You don't even need microgreens trays. You could literally cut a milk carton in half or use one of those plastic clamshell containers you bought something else in. So a container. Then you'll need a growing medium. So you can use a hemp grow mat or you could use something more like a potting mix. Then you're going to need seeds. So you're going to put the seeds on top of that growing medium. And then after that, it's really just watering every day and making sure they have some light. So you could either use a grow light or you can even use the outdoor light. But I prefer growing inside because it's a little bit easier to control the environment. So yeah.
And where are you like getting this stuff from? Is this just easily accessible like on Amazon or are you going to like specific stores to like find this stuff? Obviously the milk carton you can get wherever you want, but
yeah, it's accessible. I find that it's like probably with most things, it's more accessible here in America than in other parts of the world because I have people reaching out from all over the world and sometimes they can't find certain stuff. So that kind of makes me sad. But yeah, all the materials are very easy to find, especially in, North America, United States, Canada.
Okay, I like that. So we now have an idea of like what we need, but I also want to hit on that cost point, the startup cost of like actually getting this equipment and whatnot. And you definitely don't want to go cheap, as you said. What are you looking at for like your average startup cost for a microgreens business with like all the equipment and everything?
So there's really two startup setups. It's like you're either going to start growing and you're going to learn how to grow from the very beginning and you might only buy a few trays and one light and a few seed packets, or you're going to start it up like from a business perspective and you're actually going to buy one of those grow racks and strap on some lights on there and have, probably 30 sets of trays, something like that. So I would say to get started for yourself to literally start growing and grow a few trays, you can get started for less than $100, no problem. And then if you wanted to do an actual business setup, I would say you can get started for under $1,000.
Nice. Relative to a lot of startup costs, those are like pretty low. There's a pretty good opportunity, as you said, to get that ROI like pretty quickly, especially with the short span it takes to grow these.
Yeah, it really is magic. It was this magic thing that I stumbled upon back in 2016. Like I knew that this was the answer for me when I first found it. And now it has come full circle because now I'm able to teach other people what I've learned because this has changed my life so much. I want to have that impact on other people's lives. And yeah, thousands of microgreens farmers have cropped up, if you will. And it really is that easy to make a go out of it. The low startup costs, the quick turnover, low space, high value crops, crazy profit margins. Yeah, it really is such a good business model.
Yeah, and like it speaks to like how quickly it's grown. You have over 120,000 subscribers on YouTube. So like you're definitely breeding other entrepreneurs as well, which I think is a cool opportunity. And I also want to speak about those trends that you've seen in the market, because I feel like microgreens and like this health and wellness, like it's not a trend, but like you've seen health and wellness really be at the forefront of people's minds since about 2020. Can you talk about the sales like those first 4 years, and like did you see an increase like when the increase of the health and wellness movement came across?
So when I first started this business, I was told to sell to chefs, and I realized pretty quickly I didn't want to work with chefs. I was also learning about the health benefits of living foods, which are sprouts, microgreens, and wheatgrass. So I knew I wanted to go into the health niche with these products from the start. So I started there. The first few years, obviously, I was learning business, learning how to grow, learning all these things because I had never wore any of these hats, and now there was a dozen hats to wear. So it worked well. I was able to grow the business quick enough to be net positive in 9 months and have a real business. I did $100,000 in my year 2.
Nice.
Then, in 2020, when all the madness happened, my business did increase even more because I had focused on home deliveries. Microgreens farmers that had focused on restaurants and then all the restaurants shut down, a lot of microgreens businesses that had all their eggs in one basket, a lot of them went out of business overnight. A few of them were able to pivot and stay in business, but businesses like mine that were a little bit more resilient, delivering direct to home, I even have my own drivers. I don't work with Uber Eats or something like that. So everything is very much controlled and resilient in times like that. It's just a direct relationship between me and my customers. So my business skyrocketed in that time. And I think 2021 was my top year. But as far as health and wellness goes, there's been a boom, right? 2016 to 2020, 2020 to now, and even into the future. I don't think it's going to slow down. I think we're realizing the effects of toxins in nature and our lifestyle and the things that we're putting in our body, all these different things that are adding up and causing negative health impacts. Now we're looking for ways to mitigate that. At least when you get past 30 years old is when you start thinking about that stuff typically.
Can I get a drum roll, please? Because we are giving away a free lifetime access to the Academy for one lucky listener. And it's super simple to participate. All you need to do is leave us a review on Apple and then send us a screenshot as proof. It takes 5 minutes for lifetime access to the UpFlip Academy for free. So 2 steps. Leave us a review on Apple Podcasts, send us a screenshot, and the link to participate is in the show notes below. If you are a wannabe entrepreneur, the courses in there are so invaluable for you to actually get that first business idea off the ground. And then for the current business owners that are looking to sharpen their skills, there are a ton of courses in there for you. And the best part, you're going to be able to connect with other top-notch entrepreneurs in your field to network with them and learn from them. The winner will be announced on July 26th. All you need to do, leave us a review on Apple, send us a screenshot of proof, and you guys can find more details in the show notes below.
That's what I think is like why this is such a good opportunity for people. Because obviously we named one, it's low startup costs, you're cash flowing positive, but like you have trends behind you. I'm in Austin, Texas, and like it's a very health and wellness friendly city. And there's just such a push from people 25 years old to like get rid of toxins and like cleaning supplies and making sure everything's like whole foods type of stuff. So I feel like that's why this is also such a good opportunity, is because of the true boom we're seeing. It's just like the forefront of like a humongous trend that we'll continue to see.
Yep, definitely a boom, definitely a trend that's working in favor for the microgreens industry. I think one other thing that we're also seeing is relating to just entrepreneurship and startups, because people are looking for that type of thing, especially since 2020. And the fact that this business model is such a turnkey model, I think that almost the fact that I think it's growing from 2 ends. I think it's growing from the consumer standpoint because people are eating healthier and learning what to eat and healthy living foods. But then it's also being driven from the other side where it's the entrepreneurs going out, doing this as a business and then driving that market forward because they have to with their marketing. So yeah, I think it's being driven from 2 sides. I even posted a video on, should you become a microgreens farmer in 2024? I posted this a month or 2 ago. And in that video, I even pulled a sample clip from Gary Vee talking about the trends in clean eating. And it really is big time. And you can look at the graphs. If you go to Google Trends and type in microgreens, and you can see the trend on the graph just going up with people searching microgreens. It's really cool.
Yeah, that's why I think it's like such a good opportunity is because one, I'm huge into health and wellness as well. And like I can really feel it here in Austin, but like across the world, essentially, especially the United States, like people are really starting to wake up to like, oh, I should not be eating 15 Oreos a day that comes from these fake chemicals. I should actually be eating healthy foods that are going into my body. So yeah, I think it's a great opportunity. I want to speak, we're now in 2024. You said 2020 to 2024, there's been a big boom. Getting your first customer today, or once people are growing these, they have everything. How would you then advise to like get your first like customer, like your first sale then?
Well, a lot of people would say friends and family first, but, so skipping that one, because that's like too simple and easy. I normally recommend that people start off at farmers markets because there's a few amazing benefits at farmers markets, especially if you want to do something like a home delivery service, which is what I do. The people coming to a farmers market, they're so pre-qualified. They're local, right? You're not traveling too far to get to that market. They're not traveling too far to get to that market. So they're a good candidate for that direct delivery. They're looking for that type of product. They're looking for, farm, organic, local, that type of stuff. So that's another pre-qualification. And then another great benefit is that you don't have to know marketing. You don't have to learn anything about marketing. You don't have to learn anything about social media. You go to these markets, people come, they look at all the different tables and the vendors, and they end up buying stuff. And it's a great opportunity to start getting the word out about your company, learn different pricing and different packaging. I did a bunch of learning in the beginning, learning how to talk to people and what to say and what people are really looking for when they're actually buying your product. Making some of those first sales, of course, that was where this question originated. That's where you can make some of your first sales. And then the biggest value that I think you can draw from a farmer's market is taking these people from farmer's market customers into weekly home delivery customers. So that way you have a real business that's secure. You know how much to grow each week. You know how much you're going to be selling each week. And you have that direct relationship with the customer and have their information on file. So I think farmers markets are a great place to start. They just make a lot of sense. And then paired with going to the farmers markets, maybe once or twice a week, you should be walking into restaurants, walking into health food stores, walking into grocery stores, stuff like that. And you can create a real business doing six figures within a year. I have a guy who took my challenge in January, my January one tray away challenge. And by the next challenge in March, he already had a six-figure business and was doing thousands of dollars a week in sales.
It's literally incredible. And I like the one tidbit that I want the audience to really hammer here or listen here is you said to do the home delivery and do like reoccurring payments because essentially then it's predictable on how many sales you're having, you know your customers. A question that comes to mind for me is like, how do you price this business and like what you're selling?
As far as pricing goes, the pricing is pretty similar across the board. When you look at different microgreens farmers, a lot of us are charging very similar prices. 1.5 ounces to 2 ounces of microgreens product for $5 or $6. Those are the small packages that are typically sold in a grocery store or at a farmer's market. Then you can have bigger sizes and go a little bit cheaper. And there's ways to achieve more value from your products, or at least more perceived value. For instance, I have a Sunny sampler box where I have 5 different varieties all in one box. So because it's one box instead of 5 and one sticker instead of 5, but the same amount of product, your profit margins go through the roof. So it's really, at the end of the day, you want to charge as much as you possibly can, as long as people are willing to pay it, right? That's kind of business 101. But I think even just looking at other microgreens farmers' websites and doing what other people are doing, or charging a little bit more and saying that it's a premium, or even price gouging and going a little bit less, depending on what your tactic is for your area, that can work out well. And you could even go to these food distributors like, Baldor or US Foods, these big food distributors that are servicing the restaurants, sign up with them as if you're a restaurant, and then you have their price listing and see what they're charging for all their microgreens.
This conversation is really exciting for me because like it really is almost like a no-brainer to start with just like everything that's going on with like trends, startup costs, all that stuff. And so I definitely wanted to ask that pricing question. And then you also said like, obviously you make a good product here. Like you can't have your microgreens that like suck. I want to shift to like the farming aspect of it a little bit as well. How do you make like a good product when like you're actually farming these? Are there some tips that beginners should know or some things that they should avoid early on?
Yeah, I would say a lot of it is dialing in your processes and your procedures, dialing in your climate. So temperature, humidity, and airflow are the 3 big important factors to have dialed in. You need to know how many seeds to put per tray. That way you're not doing too many or too little. And then after that, once those things are kind of dialed in, you just want to dial in your watering and make sure you're not over watering or under watering, because that can definitely lead to some issues. And then once you start growing these crops, you'll get the hang of it. And then you just want to make sure that they're not wet when it comes time for harvesting, because that's the biggest thing that will ruin your shelf life is harvesting wet crops. So you want to make sure the crops are dry when you harvest them into the packaging.
Is this something that you could like truly like set up in an apartment?
It is that simple. And I mean, I started in my parents' basement. So we'll put, a corner of my parents' basement. I was like putting up a fake wall to block out the cats and stuff. So it really is that possible. And then after being in 2 urban farms, I moved back into my house. My whole basement of my house is now my urban farm and where I grow my microgreens for my customers. And that's why I like it. It's really great from a tax advantage standpoint. No commute. There's a tons of advantages of running it from home. There's obviously some negative trade-offs too, like privacy and hiring and stuff like that. But running just a small business that you want to run yourself or with a partner, man, it totally works. And you can scale up as you go. So you don't need, 5 racks and big harvesting tables and all this stuff when you start. You can start with just 1 light. And a few trays underneath it, growing microgreens in your house and starting to sell them. Each tray is going to sell for around $20. So 1 light grows 4 trays. That's $80. Have them on a cycle. That's $80 a week. You can get started.
It is literally insane. Like this conversation is like so like eye-opening for me. I think it is like so cool to like actually hear like this is a business that you can do profitably. Could you do this as like a side hustle? If someone's listening is like, I want to keep my corporate job. I would never recommend someone to do that. But if you wanted to do this as like a side hustle, like could you early on?
I think this lends itself greatly to a side hustle. I think it can oftentimes work better as a side hustle than a full thing. And I know for myself, I know for many entrepreneurs, we have that entrepreneurial itch or that bug where we just want to start all these different things just because it's fun for us. It's in our nature. So the tasks of this business do get repetitive. And there are some challenges that come with growing a bigger business, including bigger facilities, bigger HVAC, more employees, which are a huge headache. And so, yes, a side hustle and a small business, I think, is very much a sweet spot for this type of business. And this is where my business has landed on, at least right now, is how I'm running it. I may grow it and really start scaling it again in the future. But right now, yeah, we're doing like right around 6 figures, so $100,000 a year. I'm running it with my partner. We're working basically 2 days a week, and it's a great business model. It's a great lifestyle. Unfortunately, we can't just go off for a 4 or 5 day vacation because these plants rely on us every day to get watered and stuff like that. There's some negative trade-offs, but overall, like, yeah, we're very happy, stress-free lifestyle. Like, we love everything that we have going on. And one of the best things about this business truly is that you're helping people. You're growing healthy foods for people, helping them to improve their health. And sometimes I think in business, especially for a new entrepreneur, they are feeling a little guilty with like making money or taking people's money and generating profits. And with this business, you never have to feel guilty because you know that you're growing food as a farmer. Like you're straight up a farmer. Like how cool is that? And then you're just growing healthy products for your local community and they're agreeing to pay you. Like that's a great way to make money. It feels good.
There's like so many things that are really behind your back for this, especially if like you are someone that like wants to run a business that is like values focused or like actually has like an actual mission instead of just like, oh, I want to acquire 30,000 users on my software. It is like a truly like values based business where like you are improving your community through like healthy eating. So some other questions that come to mind, this is like super interesting, side hustle, all that good stuff. You have a partner. Can you kind of peel back like the team that you have here just so people can think about like going from 0 to 1 and then 1 to 10 and actually scaling it?
So I'm talking about my life partner. Her name is Alyssa, and eventually we'll get married, I'm sure. But right now, she's still my girlfriend. She's running a lot of the farm right now. It's basically her responsibility for the most part. She's doing the daily watering. She's doing all the tray making. She's actually making some trays right now while we're on this call. And then we do the big harvest on Wednesdays, and I help with that. And then we have driving on Thursdays, which is split between 2 drivers, her being one of them. So there's a lot of different ways you can do it. You can have multiple harvests with multiple deliveries. You can try to group everything into one big harvest and one big delivery and stuff like that. And it'll change over time as your business grows and shifts. But in the beginning, it wasn't like that. It was just me growing the business by myself. Alyssa was working in the education system and I was able to rescue her from that system. Back in, 2018, 2019, around there. And she's been working with me full time ever since. Yeah, in the beginning, it's a lot lighter. The microgreens, the plants, they're going to be growing. Like once you set them up, you just water them every day, they're going to be growing. You don't need to sit there like helping them and egging them on, which is another amazing part of this business model is once it's set up and they're growing, now you can go focus on improving your systems or getting more clients or whatever else you need to do for your business.
I think it's cool to like know that like you ran this for like 2 or 3 years basically on your own and grew it to 6 figures in that second year. Because I just want to like give people that context about like the potential here to like just do this by yourself, what it could take to grow. So yeah, you definitely hit on that one perfectly.
Yeah, and you can definitely do this on your own. You can run a 6-figure business doing $100,000 in revenue per year with one person working, and it won't feel as bad as like a 9-to-5 job or anything like that. It'll feel much better.
Yeah, I mean, you talked about, I mean, you guys are working like 2 days a week. I'm sure it's more than that. But yeah, you did say the negative of it is like it's hard to like actually leave because you have these plants that need to grow. We've been talking a lot about the positives of this. There are so many positives. What are some other negatives, though, that someone should take into account before they get started?
Yeah, some other negatives. So you do need to control the climate, especially once you start growing for a business. So this means things that may be a little bit noisy, like a fan. So like fans going in the grow space. It may get a little bit humid in the grow space. So you want to start bringing that down with a dehumidifier. So equipment can be a little bit noisy. It's not a super bad thing. The tasks can be quite repetitive. And this can be good for an entrepreneur to just sit there doing repetitive tasks. Then you have a chance to think about your other things that you want to be thinking about. But it can be bad if you're not super mentally stable, or I've seen it with my employees. Like they're sitting there in the farm for hours by themselves. You know, if they're not mentally good and they're just thinking bad thoughts as they're working, you know, they're going to go crazy. They're going to go a little bit stir crazy because the tasks are that repetitive. And that's been one of the big challenges, is working with employees and trying to find employees that will stay for long terms with this factor. So employees is definitely a challenge. And then, you know, inconsistencies in the market in terms of like seeds. You know, you get great seeds every time, and then one time you buy a batch of seeds and they just don't perform well, and you're like, oh no. And now hopefully you're not scrambling, but sometimes you'll be scrambling because you don't have any other seeds and you have to grow these crops to make sure you're completing orders 2 weeks later. So there's some things like that, but there's not a whole lot of negatives. There's a lot of great aspects to this business.
What is like so repetitive about like some of the tasks?
You're just doing the same thing over and over again. So you're breaking up soil into a bin. You're putting the soil into the trays. You're flattening it out. You're putting the seeds on the trays and then stacking them for germination. So that's like tray making. Then you have some weekly tasks that happen once a week, but then you have daily tasks like watering. So watering every day. Is it really all that bad to go down there for 20 minutes and water your crops? No, but it's still a mindless task that you just have to do every day. You know, it's not exciting after you do it 1,000 times. The tray making, although it's my favorite task, it's not exciting anymore. I've made 10,000 trays with my own, you know, and then harvesting. So it's the same thing every week. You know, you're just cutting microgreens, putting them in a container, harvesting. So it's repetitive, but at the end of the day, until the robots get good enough to be harvesting these greens and doing the full robotics thing with the growing, then we'll have some human input and some repetitive tasks, and that's all right.
I like it. So Donnie, before we get into our fan blitz questions, I just want to kind of take a moment to think about, what do we want this to look like in 3 years? What is Donnie Dreams? What do you want this to look like in 3 years? Just so we can start manifesting that you come back on this podcast. What would a successful 3 years look like for you guys?
Successful 3 years for me, because now I have my own property and my own house, right? So we're doing a lot of stuff outside. You know, once you start growing, you don't want to stop. And now we're have a big garden and we have 8 ducks and all this great stuff. So in 3 years, I want to have full production outside. I'm growing most of my own food, self-sufficiency and all that. I want my microgreens business to probably be around doubled in size in 3 years. And I know that's not very ambitious at all. It's probably just where I'm going to want to have it. Otherwise, it might be way scaled if I go the other direction. Then I want definitely more microgreens farmers to be coming around. I want more people farming, and especially more young people farming. That's amazing. FarmStar is a software that I've been developing for 4 years. That's actually launching this week. So hopefully that's running really smoothly for microgreens farmers by 3 years from now. That should be like really perfect with all the kinks worked out. And then I hope to, in 3 years, have all of my courses complete as well. Because I have my first course done, which is really teaching people the growing aspects. It's the 1 tray away challenge. And then the next course will be teaching you how to set up your farm for maximum efficiency and all that and for success. And then the last course will kind of be a culmination of everything, but it'll be like the whole business package and all of it together.
I love it. A lot of good stuff happening your way. Excited to hear how this goes in 3 years. But let's go to our fan blitz questions, because these questions are submitted from our community. And guys, if you are listening to this and want to listen in and ask questions of world-class entrepreneurs, you can do that at www.youtube.com/UpFlip. Donnie, you ready to close this out here?
Yeah, let's do it.
Perfect. Number 1, we talked about this. We'll ask it again, though. Is it a full-time job, or can you pursue other activities?
You can totally pursue other activities, and it's really going to be what you make it. If you want it to be a side hustle and you want it to be, you know, on the smaller side, that's fine. It's going to bring in some extra income that's going to help pay your bills or help pay your mortgage. If you want it to be full-time, you can do that too. Just know it's going to take a lot more work and effort, and there's other headaches that come with that, like bigger buildings and more employees. So either way you want to do this, it's going to work. But especially if you're interested in doing this as a side hustle or still want to do your other things alongside this, it's an amazing opportunity.
I love it. Next question. What types of microgreens do you grow?
I grow broccoli, radish, red acre cabbage, cilantro, sunflower. I grow 2 types of radishes, rainbow radish and China rose radish. And I think that's everything I grow. And peas.
What type of packaging do you use?
So this is actually, we didn't talk about this, the sustainability factor. This is one of the things that did bug me over the past few years is all the plastic, the single-use plastic. So since 2 Aprils ago, when I reopened my farm from my house, I switched over all my packaging to 99% plant-based, biodegradable, and compostable packaging. And they still look like normal clamshell packaging, the nice, clear plastic packaging, but it's sustainable. So that's what I switched to.
I think that's a perfect thing to especially pair with this because like a lot of packaging will go into microgreens, and that's also someone that's into microgreens probably wants sustainability. Yeah, just think of that persona there. But number 4, what is your shelf life of your microgreens from what you harvest?
Great question. It's going to vary, one, from your quality. If you harvest wet crops, they could go bad in literally 2 days. Or quality is important here, but it also matters on your variety. So I tell everybody a 1-week shelf life. Bulkier crops like peas and sunflowers can last literally a month in the fridge. But other things like radish and broccoli will probably go bad in about a week. So I tell everybody just 1 week shelf life. Plus, it's all weekly deliveries that I'm doing anyway. So they want to be eating those crops in a week before they get their new delivery.
Then last question for you. How do you prevent your seeds from spoiling?
Really, the equation here, it has to do with temperature and humidity. So if you keep your temperature in Fahrenheit plus your humidity in percentage, if you add those numbers up and it's below 100, you're golden for seed storage. I haven't been able to achieve that most of the time in my farm spaces and wherever I'm storing my seeds. So I kind of just store them out in the open and, I haven't noticed anything too bad happening to them. Sometimes if your seeds lose their vigor or their energy, you can actually zap them by putting them in the freezer for a few days and then taking them back out. Kind of reinvigorates certain seeds, so that can help. But yeah, if you can keep a room a little bit cooler and a little bit less moist, that's going to be the best case scenario for storing seeds.
Donnie, thank you so much for being here today. Appreciate all the insights. Very last thing for you, where can people find you and learn a little bit more about you?
Yeah, absolutely. I would say go to donniegreens.com. That's kind of my little hub. You can see the different things that I have going on. It'll give you a little link to my YouTube channel, link to my courses, stuff like that.
Want to call the shots in your own business? Jump on over to the UpFlip Academy and soak up wisdom straight from the pros. It's your shortcut to entrepreneurial success. Step into the boss shoes faster than you thought possible. The link is in the show notes below. Thank you so much for being here. Great insight. So thank you so much.
Cool. Thank you.